This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, a community of more than 40,000 fermentation enthusiasts from around the world. Visit homebrewersassociation.org for recipes, brewing tips, and conversation. homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, homebrewing author Chris Colby joins us to talk about brown ales. While it's not Chris's favorite style of beer, he gives us some tips to make the most of the style. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com. And we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of the stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters will see an early release and bonus footage of the latest Basic Brewing video episode this coming Friday. It's the one where we sample my take on one of Peter Simon's historic mild ale recipes using dark Karo syrup. What will Steve think about it? Tune in to see. The general public will get access to the episode next Friday, but they won't get the bonus footage or the recipe posted online. So thanks to everybody who is pitching in to support the podcast. We recorded that episode before hunkering down for self-isolation. I know it'll be strange to see us standing right next to each other there in close proximity. I find myself looking at old episodes of a Match Game from the 1970s and thinking, look how close they are sitting next to each other. And then Gene Rayburn kisses somebody right on the mouth, and I'm weirded out even more. It was creepy before, but, just more so now. And they all smoke right on the set. Hey, I can finally tell you what yeast I used on my Breeze Pale Ale Malt and Cascade Smash Beer. It was A44 Kviking from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. That's right, Kviking is back, and Jessica at Imperial says they're on track to make it a core strain in mid-April, so look for it at your local homebrew store. Kviking is a blend of 3 Kvike strains that can produce an insane amount of pineapple, guava, and other exotic tropical fruit aromas. Imperial says the Kviking blend thrives in hot fermentations when big, complex ester profiles are desired. You can use the blend for anything from new school hazy IPAs to traditional Norwegian farmhouse brews. The Kviking blend also works well when fermenting kettle-soured worts, when a strong tropical fruit character is desired. Now, I've used Kviking doing a hot fermentation on the porch in the middle of summer, but this time I fermented it at around 74 degrees or 23 C. And the flavor, the character of the beer, it pairs well with the Cascade hops that I used in the boil and in dry hopping, and it was darn quick. I brewed on a Saturday. Fermentation was complete by Monday morning, so I dry hopped at that point and then kegged on Wednesday. So from pitching to kegging in 4 days, and it's delicious. We love Imperial, the highest pitch rate of any liquid yeast producer at 200 billion cells. It's great stuff. Ask your local homebrew store about A44 Kviking, now a core strain from Imperial Organic Yeast. I'm very excited about Kviking coming back to stay. They sent me another pack, and I'm deciding on what to brew with it next. I might just wait until it warms up a bit so I can ferment out on the porch again. Hey, in our discussion with Joe and Tricia from Lilybell Meads last time, I neglected to mention that mead maker Matt Whitey was the one who introduced us to Bochet or burnt honey meads way back in 2013. That was a fun conversation and really opened our eyes to something new to us anyway. So cheers to Matt for bringing Bochet into the Basic Brewing archives. And if you want to listen to that show, look for the October 31st episode of 2013. And, there's no paywall on the archives. Never has been, And as far as I know, we're not planning on doing it. So we're coming up on 700 audio shows posted since July of 2015. Crazy. Hey, you know what's not crazy? Using the Build Your Own Beer feature on HighGravityBrew.com from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. If you find the Build Your Own Beer page on HighGravityBrew.com, you can peruse a whole homebrew store's worth of ingredients all in one page. First, you can choose from all grain or extract, and then you can select from base malts, crystal malts, specialty malts, hops, spices and adjuncts, fruit purees and flavorings, and yeasts. It's mind-boggling the number of items that each of those categories have. And as you scroll down the page, adding items to your list, the price is tabulated at the bottom of the window so you can track your cost as you go along. Very handy. While you're hunkering down at home, let Desiree and Dave and all the rest of the family at High Gravity send you ingredients and keep you brewing. While you're on HighGravityBrew.com, of course, you can check out the excellent selection of electric brewing gear and use the code EBC75BB, that's EBC75BB, to save $75 off electric controllers and systems. High Gravity takes the pain out of propane and helps you brew your way through this current situation. That's at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, I hope y'all are supporting our advertisers as much as they support us here at the show. We can all get through this together. I'm posting this on April 1st, and this interview has sort of an April Fool's Day spirit about it. I did a search and discovered that Chris Colby and I have never done a show on brown ales. Then I talked to him about it and discovered why. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's been a while. What have you been up to?
I have been writing a book and writing a magazine article 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 and stuff like that.
Can you tell us anything about any of that, or is it all secret?
Oh, no, I can tell you. I can bore you with all those details.
We got time.
Nothing but time. Yeah, I'm writing a book for the Brewers Association on hard seltzer, and that is slated to be due out in September. But I'm also writing for a magazine called Fermentation, which is, I think this is our third issue, is coming up soon. And yeah, I've been in the last couple issues of that. I've had one or two articles, and in the next few, I have a couple articles. And so, yeah, I've been writing for that magazine quite a bit. I've got an article for Zymergy that I just got to finish. I was doodling on it forever. Lots of writing. I also have a garden. And that's about it. Just hiding away from, Superflu.
Yeah. Well, if you're like me, and I think you are, you work at home, and you, I tend to be a hermit nowadays. For the past few years, I never go anywhere except the post office and to go to the park to walk. And so the biggest difference in my life right now is instead of going to the grocery store every other day, I go like every 2 weeks. So it hasn't, impacted my life a whole bunch. My son's home from college and going to college in his room. But, so has it changed your lifestyle much?
Sadly, no. I just sit at my house and never do anything. And yeah, it's pathetic.
But now you're a hero.
Yeah. I'm freaking heroic.
Well, the other day, I can't remember the context, but on Facebook you tagged me because you were on another podcast somewhere else, and then you said something about that you were going to talk to me about brown ales, and I was like, and I guess you were joking, but I was like, hey, I don't think we've talked about brown ales over the all the years that we've been doing this. I searched the archives, and I can't find an episode that we've done on brown ales.
Yeah, talk about being heroic.
The bar is low.
Yeah.
So let's talk about brown ales. We got how many different kinds are there, and what differentiates them from other brown ales like porters and stouts and such?
I'd say porters and stouts are good. And that leaves brown ales. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not a fan of brown ale, so like I've never been, one of those people who want to like, ooh, is this a northern brown ale or a southern brown ale? Yeah. I just don't care. To me, it's just like a vomit style. It's like it's a style that tries to do everything and fails at all of it. It's like it sort of tries to be like a dark beer, but it's not really a dark beer. It's not hoppy, but it's not hoppy either. It's, yeah, I don't like it. Or at least I don't like most.
Well, I was going to say, if there's no way to make a good one, we should just cut the conversation off right now. But surely that you know some tips and tricks to make something good out of something that's kind of meh, right?
Yeah, I do. Make it not brown ale is essentially it's like almost well, not almost, it's like a joke in my homebrew club. Everyone knows how much I hate brown ale, and these two brewers, Dan and Joel Dewberry, once brewed a brown ale and named it Chris Colby's Brown Ale, and it was actually pretty good. It was very good. They're good brewers, and the reason it was good is that they added more dark grains than they quote unquote should have, and it made it a little more hoppy. And so moving brown ale from something that's just completely blah to something that has something going for it, that's what I'd recommend. I mean, if you submit it to a contest, people say, it's too interesting, not a brown ale. But that's my imitation of a BJCP judge. I'm finding this beer interesting. I'm going to have to mark it down.
You're making nothing but friends in this week's episode.
Yeah, I do that. As a kid, there was this Steve Martin joke where he said, and this is paraphrasing, but he said, I wrote this book on how to make friends with absolutely everybody. And he's like, well, I didn't do it alone. I wrote it with some other. And that was, even as a kid, that was like one of my favorite jokes ever. And probably set me on a lifelong course of just, I don't know, not liking people and having them not like me.
This explains a lot, this whole thing.
It's all due to Steve Martin.
So we've got the in searching the BJCP guideline app, which is a handy thing to do. You got your English or British brown ales, and you got your American brown ales. And from what I can tell, the difference is basically hops. The American versions are a bit hoppier than their British counterparts.
Yeah, the American version is a little the IBUs, the actual bitterness is a little bit higher, and then they're generally also late hopped a little bit more, or maybe even dry hopped to bring a little more hop aroma. Also, I don't know if this is in the BJCP guidelines, but it seems to me in like reality, American browns are usually a little bit darker in color and a little bit more roasty. But I don't know. That's just my impression.
But you don't want to go too far with the hops, or else you'll stray into the brown or black IPA category. So let's talk about how would you, if you were going to make Chris Colby's brown ale and make it interesting and make it something other than a porter or a stout, what would you start with on the malt bill?
Well, you have a relatively wide, and also it depends on what you're shooting for, more the American model or the British model. You can go with either something like British pale ale malt, or you can go with American two-row malt, that kind of thing. And then from there, you've got your choices of, the malts that are going to make it brown, and most brown ales include some kind of crystal malts because there's a little bit of sweetness to them. Actually, a fair amount of sweetness, especially compared to paler beers. And so, you've got your potential crystal malts, of which, run the spectrum of colors, so you can choose one or more to put in a brown ale. And then you have your darker malts, like, generally chocolate malt is a good one for a brown ale. The smaller amounts of like roasted barley or black malt can be used for just color adjustment. They don't really, or at least if you go with the black malt, that doesn't add very much flavor or aroma. And then you have sort of some more historical but harder to find malts, like either mild malt or there's actually a malt called brown malt. And you can use those as, part of your base malt.
It would seem to me,
a wide variety.
It would seem to me that just brown malt would be a good one. That gives the brown malt that Steve sells. I can't remember what the name of it is or who makes it, but it's got a nice sort of biscuity, crackery, biscuity kind of, not so roasty, but just a nice toasty character that it seems like to me that would bring a lot of nice depth to the malt bill of the brown malt.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of one thing is, I mean, a lot of brown ales are made with a fairly complicated malt bill. There's a lot of different things mixed in there because, again, it's the beer tries to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, blah blah blah. So, yeah, if you're looking for quote unquote complexity, yeah, load it up with different malts.
And what are the gravities we're looking at?
Oh, I don't know.
5% alcohol, basically. So, 1050, somewhere around there.
I thought they were generally lower than that. Well, especially the British ones are probably more around 4.5. And then the Americans probably around 5 to 5.5.
Now, it seems like to me that if you're making an English version, you use English hops, and if you're making an American version, you probably should use some American hops.
Yeah, that's super sound logic, and it works. Americans, for a brown ale like that, definitely, Cascade or one of those citrusy American-y hops. You could maybe even go for one of the piney hops, something like that. But with a British ale, you'd want to go, probably something more with the classic Kent Goldings or Fuggles or any of the newer ones like First Gold and that.
And then yeast. I'm thinking again, if you're doing the American version, you probably want a clean yeast like the Chico yeast or something like that, which depending on the manufacturer, has different names. But then it seems like to me the English version you would want to have more of an estery character coming from the yeast, and maybe not have it finish or as attenuated as the American version.
Yeah, that's again right on. In my book, the Homebrew Recipe Bible, I actually have 2 brown ale recipes, which I can't remember why in the world I did that. I was probably told to. But yeah, that's what I did. I went with the Chico yeast for the American one, and that's like a 5.4% ABV beer, and I went with the what do you call it? The London ESB strain, White Yeast 1968 or White Labs 2, or I'm sure there's other people making it. That's what the Fuller's yeast supposedly, and that's a good one because it's a little tricky. You need to pitch enough of it, or else it'll drop out early. But even if you pitch at the correct rate and get an ordered fermentation, it'll still drop out relatively early compared to the other yeast strains, but it's done, and it uh, leaves a little extra sweetness, and it also uh, has a nice estery sort of English ale character to it, which you can also manipulate by the pitching rate. The higher the pitching rate, the more neutral and clean it gets, and the more you move it down to, say 3/4 of the average or the recommended pitching rate, or even half. That'll bring out a more estery, ale like beer. Yeah, I like that yeast strain a lot.
Hmm. And post fermentation, where I'm assuming with the American version, you definitely want to look at dry hopping. But would you dry hop in the English version?
No, I mean you could, but I would. Uh, you know, Again, I'm like trying to bite my tongue. uh, it's like, would I dry hop it? I would dry hop the hell out of it. Would I recommend that if someone was trying to make a legit brown ale, English brown ale? No, then I would just say, go easy even on the late hops, and just let have a moderate amount of bitterness, a low amount in the English of flavor and aroma, and then if you're doing the American versions, kick that up like a notch, but not a bunch. And there was also, for a while, people in Texas had a sub style, I guess you'd call it, of Texas. They called it Texas brown ale, and it was just basically American brown ale, but with like an extra notch above that of hoppiness. And so yeah, it's a beer style that basically brews itself, because whatever you add into it, who cares? And just follow the English, versus American malts and yeast, and you'd I don't know, of all the recipes out there, you'd have trouble finding one that's a recipe error, unless, well, I shouldn't say that because there is the internet, but if you look at reasonable sources of homebrew recipes where someone who has actually brewed it and knows what they're doing, any recipe you find of that is probably going to be pretty good. As there's as in pouts and stouts and porters, there's a fairly, there's a broad range of flavors to it. Like if you go to the store and get have you had Newcastle? Oh,
it's been a while. Yeah,
that's gross. Yeah, it's terrible. But there's like Sam Smith's makes a brown ale, and it's actually, I shouldn't admit it because if someone in my homebrew club might hear this, but that's actually a pretty decent beer. So, it runs the gamut on this sort of the intensity of flavor, the intensity of the roast, the sweetness. There's if you were drawing a Venn diagram, a brown ale would be a very large circle that's sort of semi-impacted with mild ales and porters and stouts. And
what about the water chemistry? I mean, what would you do? Because it seems like to me it would be easy to come out with a beer that tastes muddy, and it sounds like the way you're describing it. But how would you make those roasty grains pop enough without, you don't want it to be a stout, you don't want it to be a porter, but what would you do as far as water profile?
Right, the water profile is actually kind of interesting because you've got a beer that has quite a few, or generally has a reasonably large percentage of like crystal malts, and then a small amount of the darkly roasted malts. And if you've read, what is his name? Kai Troyster? Kai Troyster?
Kai Troyster.
Kai Troyster. Yeah, he had a cool website that showed like the rise in acidity of malts versus their color. And it's pretty much linear through pale malts, through malts. But then the darkly roasted malts aren't as they aren't as acidic as their color would indicate. or if they don't follow that curve. So you have to sort of take that into account, and just you're probably best of just when you're thinking about your water chemistry, think about all the bits of the malt bill, like except your darkly roasted malts, and try to formulate it for that, because there's some and they'll be there, but they're not going to have, they're not going to have the huge effect that they are in a stout or a porter, and second of all, you don't in any beer, there's sort of a range of water chemistries that are going to work. You don't have to hit it. You don't have to hit your residual alkalinity, to 0.001 to make the beer work. It's going to be, if you're in the ballpark, then from there on, it's just, did you clean and sanitize correctly? Did you pitch enough yeast? Did you run the fermentation well? The usual stuff that makes good beer versus bad. It's not going to come down to, the exact, amount of calcium ions in your versus, carbonate ions in your brewing water.
Now, speaking of water chemistry, I have and this is a surprise for you, but I have a question from a listener, and let's see if I can find it. This is from Colin from Minneapolis, who says, who writes in, man, this has nothing to do with brown ale, but I've got you on the line, and Colin mentions you. He says, do you or Chris have any suggestions on water makeup used during a partial mash? I'm currently using softened, heavily filtered water that works well for extract brewing, but I'm wondering if I'm missing out by using this during a partial mash. Is pH the only concern, or is a lack of minerals also a potential pitfall? So there's a question from left field for you. But let's say you're doing a partial mash with a brown ale to make the question germane. What do you got to think when you're moving from extract to partial mashing? What do you have to worry so much about, or as much about water chemistry as you do when you're doing completely all grain? Say.
Yeah, you do. You need to, and also this is a great topic because I love partial mashing. But yeah, you need to, when you mash your grains, you need to pay as much attention to water chemistry as an all grain brewer does, because you're making your wort from grains. You're making some of your wort exactly as a commercial brewer would, exactly as an all grain home brewer would, from malted grains. So yeah, the water chemistry requirements are basically exactly the same. And in a partial mash beer, that brings in an interesting twist, and one that would apply to brown ales, is that if you're doing, in most partial mashes, you take the normal amount of specialty malts from the recipe, and then enough pale malts to fill up whatever your partial mashing vessel is, and then you mash that. So typically your mashes are a lot darker than a commercial brewer would do, or a all grain home brewer would do, which skews your water chemistry, to having to be mix it up more like it's a stout or a porter or a brown ale. And the way around that, which I think is pretty cool, is you just mash just pale grains by themselves. Your specialty grains, at least there's ones that can be steeped and there's ones that can be mashed. But take anything that can be steeped and just steep those in your brew pot while you're mashing in whatever your will be a mash tun for even as a partial mash. So that you're it's easier to do it's easier to calculate your water chemistry. Just formulate it like you would for a pale ale, and you could take some of your crystal malts maybe, but make it less than make it 10% or less, so it's like a pale ale essentially mashing in your partial mash brew pot, and then take the darker grains, as long as they can be steeped, and steep those instead of mashing.
And you've got time to do that while you're mashing. You could take the rest of your brewing water and like you said, put it in your kettle and do your steeping over there.
Yeah, just you need a second grain bag, but then just tie that to the handle of your brew pot and let that hang in there, and just every once in a while during mashing, just stir the brew pot so the water rushes past those, and they'll give up their their colors and their flavors, just like just either steeping for an extract beer or mashing for an all grain beer, and then make your partial mash be either completely or mostly pale malt with maybe up to 10% of up to medium crystal.
And so Colin says he's using softened, heavily filtered water. So it's
filtration is good depending on how the water softener works. Though, don't a lot of water softeners replace calcium with sodium?
Oh, I don't know.
That's not.
You're asking the wrong guy.
I don't have a water softener, so I haven't looked into it. But I think the ion exchange ones work that way. I would look to find out what the mineral content of your water is once it's been softened. Filtration is fine. That's good, especially if it's carbon filtration. But that's not going to change the mineral content of your water. But yeah, try to find out what the mineral content of your softened water, and if not, use distilled water or drinking water.
So, Colin, the answer is yes. You need to worry about the water chemistry of your water. I guess more than just extract. I mean, if he's just using extract, water chemistry is less important than when you're mashing.
Yeah, definitely. If you're even if you're steeping grains and then dissolving malt extract to make your wort, the water chemistry it may influence the flavor of your, you might be able to accentuate hops, say, by adding a little bit more gypsum. But anytime you're mashing grains, you need a certain amount of calcium ions in there, and you need the residual alkalinity to be in the ballpark for that beer in order for the and you also need the correct grain to liquor ratio, grain to water ratio, to get the grains to convert their starches to sugars, and for that to go to completion, or as far towards completion as it does in a brewery mash.
Oh, there you go. I'm glad I remembered that email, and thanks to Colin for sending that in. So okay, Chris, if you're not going to make a brown ale, what would you, at this time of year, what would you make instead?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't brewed in so long. One thing I'd like to do right now is brew just a really light, nicely balanced beer, especially since I hope to, through spring and summer, to be gardening at a as much gardening as I can squeeze in. And when when it's Texas and it's super hot and you've been outside and the sun beating down onto you, it's not like you want to come in and enjoy a nice barrel aged imperial stout. you like something crisp and nice, and I'd like to brew either back in the old days listen to me. Back in the old days they're in the sort of first wave of craft beers, a lot of breweries put out something called a golden ale. It's just a light pale ale or a summer ale, or and that sort of verged into, some of them were almost cream ales, and some of them were just pale ales with very light amount and color of crystal, and something like that would be great. And then something like, also, I like porters. a lot. I've got a porter recipe that I really enjoy, and I should knock some of that out, because even that's, I mean, a little bit thicker, slightly sweeter, slightly more flavorful beer, but it's still not, the way I brew it, at least, it's dry enough that it's within the range of being a refreshing beer after 3 or 4 golden ales that could, might slow down to the porter or something.
Pace yourself with a porter.
Pace yourself with a porter.
Well, despite your, I think there's some good information in this show. Despite your prejudice against the style of brown ales, I think that homebrewers can knock out a delicious example. But they've certainly got more time on their hands to do that. In talking to Desiree and Dave from High Gravity and Steve from Steve's Brew Shop, people are buying a bunch of ingredients. They've all of a sudden remembered that they can homebrew. So it's an interesting time, and I'm glad that some people are getting some good out of it, and learning or I'm seeing photographs of people brewing who on Twitter and Instagram and such. People who hadn't brewed in a while, and so if we can take one positive thing out of this whole thing, is that people are finding out they can brew again.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean the secrets to making a good brown ale are basically, this is the secrets to brewing any good beer. Pay scrupulous attention to your cleaning and sanitation, raise enough yeast, so that you have a decent yeast pitch, aerate the wort well, run the fermentation at a temperature that are going to produce the character that you want from your yeast. And, those are the biggies, as they are with any beer. Clean and sanitized and run a good fermentation. And that's 90% of the battle.
Well, Chris, I appreciate your taking time out of your busy day and in making words, and I hope that you and Jennifer and all the cats stay well and be safe.
Yeah, you too. Hopefully, every homebrewer just hunkers down for a few weeks and rides this out without getting sick and their friends and family getting sick.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Talk to you later, James.
Well, thanks again to Chris. Looking forward to hearing from all the fans of brown ales out there. Drop me a line. What's your secret to brewing a delicious brown ale that would even warm Chris Colby's cold, hard heart? You can send those suggestions to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. And thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies always coming your way at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.